Hello, plantlings. It's the Comics Kid 2099 here, and like every Saturday, I'm here to talk about an episode of a superhero animated series. Today, I will be talking about the Batman the Animated Series episode House and Garden. If you haven't seen the episode, I'm about to sum it up and spoil some things, so you can get caught up on what happened just by listening to me talk about the episode. So if you don't like spoilers, you should keep that in mind. Either way, you have been warned. Someone is using a special plant toxin to rob the wealthy of Gotham. Batman thinks it's poison ivy, but Gordon says that she has rehabilitated. So now she's married and she has a great relationship with her two stepsons. Or does she? Turns out her husband doesn't even have custody of his sons, and his sons aren't even sons at all. Something is fishy. Turns out Ivy has found a way to create plant humans who will obey her, and this is how she's created her family while keeping her husband locked up in the basement. Batman and Robin rain on her parade, but she escapes. Cue credits. Like most of the episodes in the series that reuse a villain we've seen before, this episode creates a new modus operandi for Ivy. In the past, she was all about killing off human beings because she thinks that plants are better, or some nonsense like that. No, I've never really liked Ivy, even in this series, sue me. Here, her motivations are much more interesting and twisted. As Paul Dini and Bruce Timm both mentioned in the commentary for this episode found on the DVD, some supervillains will have desires that aren't all that different from what a non-supervillain would want. Ivy wants a family, that's kinda sweet, but it gets supervillainy really quickly whenever we see that she's willing to kidnap a doctor and keep him locked up in his basement just to use his genes to create her plant clones. This is a really good balance of the supervillain having a real human motivation while still maintaining their villainous aspects so we don't feel too sorry for them. This isn't an easy tightrope to walk, as evidenced by numerous villains in pop culture who creators will try to make too nice or too mean. I applaud this episode for being able to keep that balance without leaning too far in one direction or the other. This episode also manages to subvert my expectations in who the villain of the piece actually is. When you hear the title House and Garden, you think Poison Ivy, and the first act of the episode is trying very hard to make us think that Ivy has reformed. Of course, I know that isn't going to last, just from what very little I know about the future of this series, but it speaks volumes about how convincing this episode was that I actually thought that Ivy was innocent in this episode. I suspected the husband was somehow using Ivy's plant control powers to rob the wealthy, and that Ivy would find out at the end and return to her old vengeful all humans are scum characterization, sort of like how the Penguin made a genuine attempt at reformation in Birds of a Feather. Admittedly, the big reason why this episode fooled me is because it broke the number one rule of mysteries that I have come to accept as an unbreakable law. The last person you suspect, that's the culprit, or the converse of that, the first person you suspect usually isn't the culprit. So when you see that Ivy is the bad guy featured in this episode, if you're me, you're thinking of who else could be the big mastermind behind this episode. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that I was wrong. And it wasn't a reveal that came completely out of left field. Well, if you're okay with Ivy being able to create plant-human monsters, then it didn't. I will say that is a bit of a stretch for her powers, even when her powers are so vaguely defined anyway. Just because she has an immunity to poisons and has been seen growing plants at an extraordinary rate, that doesn't mean that out of nowhere she would suddenly be able to make plant humans with a lifespan of days. But if that's my one complaint about this episode, then I would say this episode is doing pretty good. And I would say it did do pretty good. Considering how little I actually like Ivy, this episode made me not hate her as much as I usually do, and it provided a good story with logical twists that threw me for a loop. All in all, a very well done episode. But that's just my opinion. What did you guys think? Like it? Hate it? And what did you think of my review? You can answer both of those questions in the comments below. And if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you did like this video, I do this sort of thing every Saturday. Next weekend, I'll be talking about an episode of Batman Beyond. And the week after, I'll be talking about another episode of Batman the Animated Series. And I do lots of other videos throughout the week, so be sure to check those out as well, if you're into that sort of thing. In any case, I'll see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day.